What's going on there, kings and queens and everyone in between? It's your boy MFC in the building, back at you again with yet another Master Duel video. But that being said, have you ever wanted to play a video game in which you just had to turn off your brain, sit back, relax, and watch your opponent kill themselves because they made assumptions and they didn't read? If so, this is the deck for you. Welcome to TIMELORD. So TIMELORD's done quick with the deck profile. Let's get right into it. So we're going to look at just the TIMELORD cards for now. We got 3 Time Maiden. This card basically searches out every single TIMELORD in the deck. Leads me to one of my MVPs, Camion. This card right here, he's the GOAT. This dude is the God Squad. This dude is the leader on the team. This is one of those cards, underrated, puts the team on his back in clutch situations. Now, what does he do? Much like all TIMELORDs, the universal effect of cannot be special summoned from the deck. If you control no monsters, you can normal summon this card without tributing. This is very important because there are so many times where I will special summon this, tribute it to get the search, to get one of these bad boys added to my hand, and then they activate Max C. Summoning these is not a special summon. They just come out, which means you don't draw, you threw Max C away for no reason. You're destroyed. It's over. GG's, shake my hand. But maybe asking, all right, that's cool and all, but what exactly do the TIMELORDs do? What power are they capable of? Well, I'm glad you asked, because at the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, shuffle 1 card your opponent controls, whether it's face up, face down, doesn't matter, monster, trap card, field card, doesn't matter. And if you do, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. Neither player can activate card effects in response to this effects activation. Let me read that again. Neither player can activate cards or effects in response to this effects activation. So if I go into the battle phase and I pop this, Appaloosa don't get to the negate. Back to the deck you go. Oh, what's that? You're gonna sit here and try to do some nonsense with a hand trap? No, be gone, wannabe. It's not happening. You're going back to the deck. See you later. Goodbye. Have a nice year. It doesn't matter. This dude packs your bags and extradites you to another country where you will not be seen and or heard of from again. Because this doesn't go back to the hand. This is back to the deck. You are shuffled. This is basically as close to the Shadow Realm as a card can potentially get in the confines of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel. Now, obviously, you got Big Mission and Raffion. Now, Mission, this guy halves your opponent's life points. Okay? This is Big Drewski. Someone's got 8,000 life points. No, they have 4,000 just because this thing battles. Raffion, not to be confused with the Ninja Turtle named Raph, but Raffion, basically, when it battles a monster, it can choose any monster that it battled with on this turn and inflict opponent damage equal to the attack of the monster that it had battled this turn. So, let's say you're going against Chaos Max Dragon, and then this bad boy right here attacks, and then Raffion attacks. Since they have 4,000 attack on their Chaos Max Dragon, you select it as the attack target, you activate this effect, that's half their life points, 4,000, you just OTK'd them. And if you have both on the field, obviously, let's say they have 7,000 life points, 3,500, still an OTK. But let's say you're playing against regular Blue Eyes or just somebody that has, I don't know, let's just say for the sake of it, 2,500. Well, what you would do here is when you attack with this, that's 4,000. And then if they have 2,000 or more attack, you go into this, you hit them, that's 2,000 plus damage. So let's just say minimum it's 2,000. That brings them down to 2,000 life points. Or if you have 2 Missions on the field, brings them down to 2,000 life points because half 4,000, half again 2,000. Then since they're both level 10, you can overlay into Goofstaff Max, and then boom, 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 they're finished. It's over. GG, shake my hand. Big F's in the chat. Now, we also have this bad boy, Sendion, really clutch card here. And this one has a little bit of a different summoning condition, but cannot be special summoned from the deck. You can only control one Sendion, the TIMELORD. So that means there's no using 2 of these at the same time. It's not going down. But if your opponent controls a monster, you can normal summon this card without tributing. Cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. Neither player takes battle damage involving this card. At the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, inflict 2,000 damage to your opponent. Now, something that I need to address about this whole if this card battled, all it means is was an attack declared on it or did it declare a successful attack? It doesn't have to battle a monster. It can attack your opponent, quote unquote, directly, do no damage, but you will still get the 2,000, the halving effect, the targeting effect, the send back to the deck effect. All of that stuff still procs, which makes it very goated, by the way. Now, all of that being said, this is all great and dandy, but I know what you're thinking. Well, there has to be a downside to these monsters. Well, much like all TIMELORDs, During your standby phase, this card shuffles itself back into the deck. But due to cards like Time Maiden and another card that we'll talk about later, you're not going to have to worry about that too much, because you will be able to make these cards more fluid and more active because you can search them. Hell, you can search the Searcher. With this deck, you can search Ash Blossom and you can search Swift Scarecrow. We'll get into that card in a minute. But other Time Lords, we have Zaphion, and this basically works as a heavy storm, except doesn't work on your side of the field. Basically, Harpy Feathers does, so I guess to be more akin-like. But instead of destroying the cards, it shuffles all back row back into your opponent's deck. That's right. You're going against Eldlick. They drop 5. This thing gets an attack off. All those cards go back into the deck. They don't go to the graveyard. There is no setup. They're back to top deck mode. Very clutch. Now, Metaion. Metaion is a little bit different, but if your opponent has flooded the monster zone with a whole bunch of cards that are extra deck cards and they don't have any main deck monsters, this card is really good because it returns as many monsters on field as possible to the hand other than this card. So what you can do is attack. They have fusions, XYZ, synchros, link monsters, all that type of nonsense. You can pack them all back into the extra deck. And all their resources and materials, they already exhausted them. Maybe they overextended on their combos. You just returned everything back to sender. So this card can really be good in a lot of clutch situations. And keep in mind, they're all level 10, which means if you have 2 Time Lords in your hand and Celestial Transformation, you can go into Gustav Max, which could potentially lead, or you can go into Ravenous Tarantula, which I think is a really good card, really underrated card. We'll get into that in a second. Now, that being said, we need to talk about the GOAT card in the deck, Piri Reis Map. Now what this means is at the start of your main phase 1, you can add 1 monster with 0 attack. So this is every single Time Lord except for Sandion, and it also counts Swift Scarecrow, and it also counts Ash Blossom. Now, that being said, what is the rest of the effect? But you have your life points. So this is a very hefty card. It does cost half your life points to do it. After adding it to your hand, until the next turn after this card was activated, you cannot activate the added monster's effects or the effects of cards with the same name until you normal summon that monster. Now, as I said earlier, all these cards are normal summonable without tribute, provided you have no monsters on the field. So their effects will be active the turn you normal summon them. So with that being said, if you already have a really good hand and you draw this card and you don't want to necessarily overextend and you know you can live at least 2 turns with your hand, you can search Swift Scarecrow. If you just want to have an Ash Blossom in the hand for safekeeping for a couple turns from now, just to get a feeling out for your opponent, you do have that option. I wouldn't recommend it, but these are options that you do have. But you can search the Searcher. What does Time Maiden do? If you draw no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. This card is treated as 2 tributes for the tribute summon of any Time Lord monster. That effect is pretty much irrelevant, but it can come up clutch if there's a part where you already have another monster on board. If you're playing other builds of the deck, like a Kaiju, and then this monster lives for the next turn, then you can normal summon it and have the Kaiju active on field. But you contribute this card and add 1 Time Lord with 0 attack from your deck to your hand. So any of the Time Lords that I'm playing right now except for Sandion. And then you can banish this card from your graveyard and special summon 1 Time Lord with 0 attack from your deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. But you cannot special summon other monsters the turn that you activate this effect. So when you special summon this card from, having no monsters on the field, keep in mind, you cannot activate this effect because it counts as a special summon and then activate this effect in the grave. You do not get to use both of these effects per turn. Now, if you normal summon this, then tribute it, then activate the effect, unfortunately, you won't be able to do that either, because when you activate that, when you normal summon it, tribute it, and it's in the grave, then you can activate the effect, bring out one of the Time Lords. So if there are certain instances where if you're playing against someone who's got like a summon limit on you, or you have someone who's pressuring you out with an effect, or there's a situation where you can't normal summon more than 1 monster or anything of that nature, then yes, that is a play that you can make. Especially when, if you guys know anything about the Samorg Link monster when you're playing Tri Brigade or some Dino builds, where they play that card where it says you cannot special summon monsters except for wind monsters, you can always normal summon this, activate its effect, and when it's in the grave, you can special summon Raphion and do damage that way. And if it's enough for game, then hey, you're looking pretty good in the neighborhood. Let me tell you that right now. Looking pretty solid. That being said, obviously running Max C, 2 Ash Blossom, we got Kaijus. because this kaiju is also level 10, which means it can also pop off for the XYZ plays. This card is also a really good card, Kaiser Coliseum. It's godlike, not because it's oppressive, but if there's one or more monster on the field of the control of this card, his or her opponent cannot place a monster on the field if his or her number of monsters would exceed the number of monsters that are on the field of this card's controller. Since you're playing Time Lords, typically you're never going to have more than one, maybe two monsters at most. So all those decks that have cards that are like, if this card is normal summon, special, they can't do it. They're like, man, I can't summon anything. I'm actually screwed here. And they have to find a way to get one card link loops to get over your Time Lords. Or they're going to have to do something to your Time Lords, because your Time Lords cannot be destroyed. They can be targeted. So if they have send, banish, effects, things of that nature, or bounce backs to the hand, then yes, your Time Lords can be vulnerable. But not too many cards in the game are one cards that can just pop over and send things back to the hand, grave, banish zone, extra deck, blah, 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 blah. Now, we also run Harpy's Feather Duster. We run Monster Reborn. Usually, I'm not even gonna lie to you, I use Monster Reborn more often than not to mess up other people. Like if they drop a Sky Striker in the grave that I know they're gonna try to summon the next turn, I will just go ahead and Monster Reborn their Sky Striker out the graveyard just so they can't do that and they don't have that play afforded to them. There's plenty of different things you can do. Obviously, if you have one of your Time Lords that does make it to the grave, you can bring it back, obviously, for an XYZ play or, you know, an OTK. Like, it's very versatile, so it's a very live card. You love to see it. I run one Interrupt Kaiju Slumber because basically it's Raigeki, but then I get a monster, which then allows me to give you a 2200. And if I have this card, 2 copies of this card, or this card, and this card, or this card, and this card, or this card, and this card, I'm pretty much set up to give you an OTK. And, you know, you're going to have a bad time, especially if you're not pulling the Monster Reborn. For the, obviously, we got Pot of P, Celestial Transformation. If you don't know what this does, special summon one fairy monster from your hand. That monster's attack is half, but since all of my Time Lords are 0, half of 0 is 0, so that doesn't matter. And since it doesn't negate their effects, and then it says they're destroyed during the end phase, these can't be destroyed, so they will still be lingering around and be perfectly fine and won't have to be susceptible to the destruction effect. Now, that being said, for traps, you run Dimension Wall, comes in the clutch. Sometimes I want to run this at 2, but I also have Defense Draw. But we'll get into why these cards are pretty good. So basically, if someone attacks you, instead of you taking the battle damage, your opponent takes the battle damage instead. And given the fact that this burns, this burns, this burns for quite a significant amount of damage, this one's burnt. This one can't have effects activated in response to it, and it burns a little bit and can set them back with a, you know, a key member of the field being sent back. So ultimately, having a card like this is really good because late in the game, when they're like in that weird 2000 life points range, you don't have OTK, 9 times out of 10 people just knock themselves out. Defense draw, obviously you just get the draw, and since you have a searcher for your searcher, and then your searcher can search literally half your deck, then you also have this card which allows you to pull out kaijus from your deck. There's a lot of times where just getting one more card means so much, especially if you have Swift Scarecrow, which, if you don't know what that does, when an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can discard this card, negate the attack, and end the battle phase. Now, I know what you're thinking. All right, I mean, that's cool and all, but what does that really mean for me? If you go first and you have a godlike hand, and you can't OTK on your first turn, and you have Swift Scarecrow, sometimes it's okay to let them play out. They try to attack to you, go ahead and ditch the Scarecrow, and on your turn, if you have this, and then once again go into your OTK plays, since these can't be destroyed, blah blah blah, you know the spiel, you already know the deal. Then we have Royal Decree, which is just negate all other traps on the field. And meanwhile, while we do have 2 traps, having this right here has won me so many games, because they're traps that might be able to do something about my Time Lords and no longer be active. They're no longer live. They're just dead spots. Or, in my personal favorite, if they're an Eldritch player and they just throw 5 things face down, I slap this down face down, wait for the turn to be over, flip it face up, and then they scoop. So, you know, anything that screws over Eldritch players is always a big fan of in my book. Now, that being said, I have 4 link monsters that I never play. They are just here for pot of P for fodder. They're just for the prosperity fodder. Cards that have come through in the clutch for me. Pain gainer, basically anytime someone decides they're going to activate a spell or trap card, inflict 600 damage to your opponent. This is the same, but every time they special summon a monster. So like when they're really low on life points, and I know if they special summon, like if they're 1200 or less, and I know they only get 2 special summons, basically a lot of times they will end up forfeiting the game, especially if I hit them with this card, which half their life points, and it's still early game. So I'll have 8,000, and since this has the difference between life points being the attack boost that every monster, not just him, every monster on your field gets this boost, by the way. All monsters you control. So basically, if they're at like 1,500 life points, I'm at 8,000. I have 6,500 attack and defense. All my Time Lords get 6,500 attack and defense. If Sandion is somehow on the field, it has 10,500 attack and defense. And they still have their broken effects and can't be destroyed and are searchable and can be special summoned for basically for the free ski. Like you guys understand like how that can be a very annoying to deal with and a very tough thing to circumvent. Cards that have helped me in very niche cases: Utopic Dart. Basically every time you destroy a monster by battle, you can detach one material card and then special summon it to your side of the field defense position. And then you can target one face-up special summon monster you control and gain life points equal to its original attack. So if I have a kaiju on the field, or I think it can even target itself, then basically I'm gaining 4,000 life points and one other face-up, one other. So like if I do have one of those rare times where I do get to summon this, or I get 3,000 or 4,000 extra life points, and then like later on I could summon this, and trust me, you are typically not summoning more than one XYZ monster per game with this deck. XYZs are a luxury that you go for. They're not the goal of the deck. I have never had to summon number 77 yet. I don't believe I've had to summon this card, no. But he is there because, I mean, if you read this effect, kind of godlike. Basically, by using a rank 10 or 11 Dark XYZ monster, basically the other spiders, and Dark Utopic, you can take the XYZ members attached to those, and they become attached to this. If it was summoned this way, the following effect cannot be activated per turn. However, once per turn, you can detach 2 materials from this card, banish as many special summon monsters your opponent controls as possible, then attach one of those banished monsters to this card as XYZ material. If this card face up on the field would be destroyed by battle card effect, you can detach 1 XYZ material from the card set. Now, obviously, when it's a 4,000 beater, 3,000 defense, put it in defense mode, and it can protect itself. That is godlike. Definitely a big shield, something that you're going to want to see, blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, that's basically Time Lords in a nutshell. And I think we're 1 game away from plat. So the next video, we'll be going into that.